Good evening. My name is Jessica James, and I'm a senior from Owasso, Oklahoma, majoring in economics and math. This semester, I had the honor of leading the Technology Commercialization team, I-CCEW's oldest program, launched in 2006. I'm proud to say that this team has continued the tradition of excellent work. They've been tasked with developing a commercialization plan for a new sampling method, which we call buttons, for Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, even though only 2 of us knew what that meant at the very beginning. I was not one of those 2. The team has been very patient with me, along with our inventor, Dr. Robert L. White. Along with developing actionable recommendations for the Office of Technology Development, some of our other achievements include surviving 14 7 a.m. meetings, eating approximately 126 slices of pizza, and beating 2 escape rooms, even setting the record for second place for one of the rooms. It's been an honor to work with all of these talented and hardworking individuals this semester, and I know that they are excited to share the results of their work with you tonight. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Greta, who will tell you all about buttons.
Spectroscopy, a method to identify substances using light, is a $900 million market that influences the way we live. Protein shakes that you after you work out, before it hit the shelves, the protein powder was tested for contamination. And the gasoline that you put in your car, petroleum engineers quantified mineralogy to help them discover that oil, all with the help of spectroscopy. This semester, TechCom has been working on to the field of Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, or FTIR, solid sample preparation, a $17 million US market. This technology, buttons, creates uniform samples while significantly decreasing the possibility for error. In order to see where this technology best fit into the market, we interviewed over 75 experts from the field of research, technology development, and manufacturing. This semester, TechCom found end users who wish to use this product, discovered manufacturers who wish to enter into a non-disclosure agreement, and suggested product modifications to best meet the current market's needs. With a special thanks to our inventor, Dr. White, and our mentor, Andrew Pollack, we now introduce to you the exciting world of infrared spectroscopy. I'm Greta Fiedler, I'm from Norman, Oklahoma, and I study Arabic and economics. And we're Team Infrared. FTIR is a 3-step process of sample preparation, sample analysis, and results interpretation. First, scientists will grind their sample with a diluent. Then they will put the sample into a spectrometer. The spectrometer will shine light onto the sample, and the transmitted light will then be illustrated onto a spectrum, which is how scientists qualify and quantify their results. We spoke to many scientists and graduate students who use FTIR every day and discovered the problem that 71% of their total analysis time is spent preparing samples that are single-use, difficult to handle, and produce inconsistent results. In the sample preparation phase, scientists will press their sample into a pellet, increasing total sample preparation time to around 15 to 25 minutes. They also face difficulty preparing low concentration samples due to the high quantity of sample needed for current sample preparation methods. In the sample analysis phase, the pellet can easily shatter due to its fragility, meaning that scientists will need to redo the sample preparation over again. Pellets also cannot be set aside for later analyses because they will start to disintegrate. Using a different type of spectrometer with a crystal surface, substances such as sharp polymers and glues can harm the surface, costing at least $5,000 in replacement fees. In the interpretation phase, results are often inconsistent and low quality due to the dependency on sample preparation in these current methods, meaning that scientists will need to redo the entire process over again, costing at least 30 minutes in time. Now with buttons reduces sample preparation by at least 20% and decreases the possibility for error due to its reusability, ease of use, and consistent results. In the sample preparation phase, scientists no longer need to press a pellet. They will simply put the sample onto a button, decreasing total sample preparation time to just 10 to 20 minutes. Scientists can also now easily prepare low concentration samples because button structure uses 20 to 30 times less sample. In the sample analysis phase, button protects the sample from being damaged and can be set aside for later analyses if the scientist needs to go ahead and test the sample again. The testing method of buttons does not damage any testing surface. In the interpretation phase, button stable layer creates high quality and consistent results, meaning that scientists will not have to redo this process over again. As you can see, buttons addresses many of the issues that scientists are facing with their spectroscopy methods today. Now here's Wendy, who'll talk about how exactly buttons works.
This is a button, a new technology within the field of infrared spectroscopy that is only 12.7 millimeters and can fit on the tip of my finger. When a beam of infrared light is shown from the spectrometer, the light hits the substance, which is pressed onto the wire mesh. Some of the light is absorbed by the sample, while the rest comes off and is analyzed by the spectrometer. Button structure allows for functionality and versatility. Buttons are made out of stainless steel and wire mesh, which means that an end user, a researcher or scientist, can choose to clean and reuse a button or dispose of it after performing analysis. In addition, buttons comes in different mesh size options, which means that they are customizable. An end user can choose the exact button they want for the specific product or sample that they are testing. Buttons is applicable in many industries because it tests and works with solids, liquids, greases, oils, and powders. In addition, buttons is compatible with drifts and transmission, two IR techniques that are used by laboratories across the United States and make up a significant portion of the IR sampling market. Now that you know how buttons works, let's take a look at its competitors within the field of IR spectroscopy. Buttons is ideal for our specific use cases because it is fast, inexpensive, easy to use, and consistently produces high-quality spectra. Drifts, transmission, and ATR are three competing IR techniques, while slides, buttons, pellets, cards, and moles are different competing sampling methods. Buttons works with both drifts and transmission. The metrics on the left-hand side of this competitive matrix were generated after thorough interviews with end users from multiple industries. These metrics reflect what is important to end users and reveal that buttons meets and even exceeds their expectations. The first metric, the cost of analysis per sample, proves that buttons is the cheapest, costing only around 13 cents per sample. In addition, buttons is fast, taking only around 1 minute for drifts and 15 minutes for transmission. The ability to save potential for damage is also important to our end users. With buttons, this is not a cause for concern. However, Howard, a research polymer scientist, explained to us that he doesn't even consider using ATR in his laboratory because of the high potential for damage to ATR crystals, which are very expensive. Ease of use takes into account the procedure, materials, and equipment needed to prepare a sample for analysis. Buttons only needs 2 steps for drifts and 5 steps for transmission. In addition, a sample can be saved with buttons. This means that a scientist can place buttons on the side after running an analysis and bring it back later to be analyzed and compared. This is especially important if they only have a small amount of sample. Finally, buttons consistently generates high-quality spectra. This is unlike other methods, such as pellets or voles, in which the spectra that are generated are of good quality, but are variable and dependent on the human hand. Buttons is the best for our end users because it adds value to what they need, improving on specific current weaknesses of drifts and transmission techniques. Next, we will hear from Axel, who will be explaining the market for our competitive technology.
Thank you, Wendy. Well, Buns, the newest technique for IR spectroscopy sampling, has the opportunity to enter $17.14 million total annual attainable market, where research facilities and laboratories are the most important consumers. The market dollars are divided into three main techniques for infrared spectroscopy: ATR, drifts, and transmission. Within ATR, the team estimates that about 10% of the market is attainable with buttons. Throughout the course of the semester, we had the opportunity to interview a researcher at a polymer laboratory. This researcher told us that her laboratory would rather use ATR, but because they sometimes produce sticky glues and sharp polymers that may damage the crystal, they would rather switch to transmission. Then, there are the drifts and transmission portions of the market. These are 100% technologically compatible with buttons, and therefore also attainable. Next are the users. In the United States, the team found out from interviewing stakeholders from coast to coast that about 87% of all analysis with infrared spectroscopy in the country occur inside universities and other academic institutions. The next most significant segment or industry is the pharmaceutical industry, quickly followed by the food and agriculture, chemical and polymer, and environmental industries. All of these analyses occur inside laboratories. In the country, there are 29,000 laboratories with compatible technology. These are then subdivided into three main types. First, there are the internal research laboratories which belong to larger organizations, such as the University of Oklahoma or a pharmaceutical company such as Pfizer. Then, there are service testing laboratories which provide services for analysis to several different companies across all industries. Last, there are the contract research organizations. These serve the same purpose as internal research laboratories. However, they mostly serve the pharmaceutical industry and serve as external parties. Before any of these laboratories and scientists can begin using buttons, the product must comply with three main requirements: functionality, budget compliance, and accreditation. Functionality proof of concept would come in the form of tests, data, studies, all of which buttons already has. Then there's budget compliance. The team estimates that for every sample in infrared spectroscopy, a laboratory will spend $1.23. Buttons can provide the same at a cost of only 13 cents. Therefore, it complies with that second requirement. Lastly, there's accreditation. In order for a laboratory to prove that the results are both validated and unbiased, the product must be accredited. At the moment, buttons is not, but it could after a short application and at a cost of only $500. This is the economic value of buttons and who would be using it. Next is Wesley with the business model, who tells how OTD can take it from concept to reality.
Thank you, Axel. To bring buttons to market, OU's Office of Technology Development should pursue an exclusive licensing agreement with manufacturers such as ICL, who work in the spectroscopy sampling industry. Before doing so, OTD will need to meet a couple of requirements. First, they need to file a patent application, and they'll also need to meet a couple of precision and accuracy tests with Dr. White. The manufacturer will then return a $10,000 licensing fee and a 6% royalty on all revenue made by buttons. Thus, the manufacturer is the critical juncture of this business model. So it's very important that OTD selects the right manufacturer. We've spoken with 6 of the largest manufacturers in this industry and found that 3 of them, ICL, Herrick, and SpecAc, are interested in potentially pursuing an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement with OTD. The OTD should rank these manufacturers by their control of the spectroscopy market and also by their history with licensing with universities. The manufacturer will then sell buttons at a markup of about 1,200%, which is about $5 a button and is benchmarked to buttons' nearest competitor, IR cards. IR cards are also sold about $5 each, but IR cards are not reusable while buttons are. These buttons will be sold to end users such as Agripur, which works with whey protein, and Emory University, which does a lot of pharmaceutical research. These end users may need some accreditation based on what industry that they're working in. End users can then work with manufacturers to pursue ASTM and ANSI accreditation based on their needs. But how does this all translate financially? Over 5 years, buttons will bring over $150,000 in royalties and over $3 million in profit for OTD. $3 million in profit for a manufacturer. As you can see from this chart, OTD will incur a cost of about $80,000, which are the patent application fees. OTD will then break even at year 3. In this graph, we've also accommodated the initial licensing fee and also the patent maintenance fees that are paid at year 3. What this chart doesn't represent is the high profit margins for manufacturers. Actually, the profit margin is about 80% of the total revenue made by buttons, making buttons very appealing to any manufacturers. The key assumptions that we use to create this model are as follows. First, we assume a 3% annual adoption rate. This adoption rate was taken from an interview with the CEO of ICL. He told us that that IR cards, again, the most similar product to buttons today on the market, has a growth rate of about 3%. We've also assumed a 5% initial market capture, and finally, we assumed that about 80% of the customers would purchase buttons in the smallest package. From Axel's market projections, we saw that universities make the largest portion of the customers, and also we've assumed that we know that universities generally have a more sensitive budget, thus how we've applied it today in the market. To bring this all to fruition, OTD should pursue the following commercialization plan. In the next 6 months, OTD should finish filing the patent application and also meet every single pre-NDA requirement requested by the manufacturers. Next, OTD should pursue the actual NDAs and MTAs, which are material transfer agreements where they actually send the buttons to those manufacturers for further testing. They'll also actually license buttons with the manufacturer they decide best fits their needs. After that, it's smooth sailing for OTD. They can sit back and cash in the royalty checks while also paying the maintenance fees for patents. The manufacturer may continue by creating a white paper for some specifications and also filling any accreditation as needed. In summary, TechCom has developed recommendations that will help OTD bring over $150,000 to OTD in 5 years. The first recommendation is that we found specific use cases for buttons in the market today. We also found that there are specific customers and also that they are interested in pursuing an NDA with manufacturers today already. And finally, we've made product recommendations that will open a market of over $14 million that buttons can unlock. Thank you all. We'll now open the floor for questions.
Yes.
So when you were quantifying the market, you said that 10% of the ATR market was attainable, and I'm curious how you came up with that number.
We actually conducted several interviews with researchers and laboratories alike. Within that, we found that ATR sometimes is sensitive to certain types of samples. In about 10% of cases, the scientists would rather switch to a transmission, a method compatible with buttons, in order to not damage the crystal. From that, we got the 10% estimate.
Does the markup price account for the fact that it is reusable? Do you know if, speaking to your potential market, if they're willing to pay a higher price because it's reusable?
Sure. So the question was whether or not the market price could be raised even because buttons is reusable, it's a better product for IR cards. And so when considering benchmarking prices, like I said earlier, we benchmark it to IR cards and pick that same $5 price. However, because we wanted buttons to be competitive, we kept the same price, but also added the fact that because of the fact that it's reusable, the price is actually lower per use.
Yes, Dr. Holmes?
With this patent, I'm guessing that the button is ceramics on top. Is that the part of the patent? Can I make it out of, let's say, amethyst, and then come in and do the same thing that you're doing with your ceramic button?
Sure. So the question is what the patent might cover and the actual materials used. So the button actually itself is made out of stainless steel. Both the button exterior and the mesh itself is made out of stainless steel. Patents are generally very specific, and to get something passed to the US Patent Office, it has to claim a very specific set of use cases. So even though another person might come with a different made button, and actually the steel itself is useful in the button functionality. It reflects some of the light as well. But regarding claims of use, another patent would have to claim a slightly different use case, which could take time and also be difficult to replicate exactly what's in this button.
We have time for one more question. Yes, go ahead.
I mean, this is probably for me, but what does the button function to the FDIR?
So your question regards to what scientists will use button for. And so infrared spectroscopy is used to identify substances or to quantify substances. So for example, whenever Polymer Lab gets in new chemicals from their supplier, they need to ensure that the chemicals are exactly how they wanted them. And so they will use FTIR and then they will read the spectrum in order to make sure that this chemical is exactly what they ordered. Does that make sense? Okay.